We can have this conversation with other homies.
I know.
It doesn't that you like, oh, that's cool, girl. It's just necessary because we're all in this growth phase. It looks different when you get down to the nuance of it all, but at the same time, it's a lot of the same challenges and struggles and sets of obstacles, right? And the general public has no clue. They just get their coffee and they have no clue what went into that.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this next episode of our Building in Public series. This week we had Quincy Henry, the owner of Campfire Coffee. We sat down and wanted to pick his brain on what is required to really change paradigms in the industry. And the reason why this is so interesting is really going to come into focus when you understand a little bit more about Quincy's background. So Quincy did his PhD on how art entrepreneurs can create and exchange value in the digital economy. He's got really deep research, knowledge, understanding around how to create movements with community, how to utilize social proof, and how important it is that we, as a collective of independent coffee shops and partners, rewrite the narrative in a way that better serves small business owners. The other really interesting aspect of Quincy's background is he's a 2-time Grammy-nominated musician, and he's done over 500 live shows across the United States. He used those lessons and learnings to inform being an independent coffee shop, an independent brand. I think you're going to love what he has to say here around what he calls his third show principle. And that was a concept he learned as a musician, and it informs how he trains baristas when it's slow. Please enjoy the episode. Drop a comment, and thanks so much for taking the time.
I had been admiring you before I even met you because of the way people spoke about you. You inspired people through that form of art. You have such a fascinating background and philosophy, and to see how that's infused into this medium. How do these things come together for you? It's a wild synthesis, because when we talk about the time as an artist, the indie artist game and the indie coffee game, to me, is very similar in that, well, I'll say my experience has been similar, right? Like, you kind of have an idea of who you are and what you're trying to do, and all of a sudden something happens that kind of removes you from what is expected. With music, for me, obviously I'd been doing it most of my life, but it wasn't until I started playing an instrument while rapping. People didn't care that I made beats and produced all my stuff, but when they saw me perform, playing the keys and rapping, that was when buyers at venues started to take note and say, oh, okay, this is different in 2010. And it helped me get on the road. Suddenly I have a career. The same thing with coffee. It was like, we didn't even want to roast. That wasn't something that we set out to do in the beginning. But then we're kind of nudged to roast. You start looking at, okay, what does it take to roast? Tens of thousands of dollars. Roasting is kind of presented as this mystical art. It has to be so right? And then you're left to your own devices, and what we had was literally the fire pit in the backyard and a suggestion from my sister-in-law. It was like, you guys have named Campfire as it is. Whitney was talking to her, explaining how I had reached out to all of these roasters, locally and not locally, and got the runaround. Our thing was, we wanted to just sell coffee Monday through Friday, then lead group hikes and group camp trips on the weekend. We knew we wanted to help people get outside using coffee. But then this whole roasting over the fire became like, huh? People started being like, you're really roasting this over a wood fire? I gotta be able to weigh out the right amount of wood, make sure it's got the right moisture content, make sure I can distribute it evenly. It's not the same roasting process as the average roaster. People over 100 years ago, this is what they all were doing. I'm just bringing back some old shit. I'm not doing nothing new. I'm bringing back some ancient shit.
Wow.
This is how we got to these big Dietrich roasters that are powered by natural gas and propane. It's a water-based system. There's no extra fossil fuels being used. This is how coffee got to the point where it's at.
Wow.
I never thought about this. That's the thing. Most people don't. They think I'm roasting over fire because it's cool. Yeah, it's cool, but I'm really not doing nothing new. Look at this coffee, this cherry. We're going to roast this cherry over this fire, and then we're going to grind it up, and then we're going to do the whole thing. And the ritual in Ethiopia becomes a thing, and in Yemen and all these places.
I mean, that's its own science that it might not be the same as
That's
what the other way of doing
That's
it is.
right.
But it's the brick oven pizza versus the
Correct.
electric oven
Correct.
approach, right?
In the early days, I would tell people the difference of how we roast versus traditional roasters. Like, you could have a steak that you just put it in the skillet on your cooktop, and it can be a great steak. But if you threw that on a grill, it's just different. There's just something about it that is just different. The juices taste different. And I think roasting over wood, I mean, most people like things that are prepared over wood. They say, wood fire pizza, give me that all day. So when we were starting Campfire, I was really thinking about that. When we got the suggestion to start roasting and trying it over the fire, I was like, that's the Rosetta Stone, Russ, because you're already talking about trying to connect people to nature. You're already trying to get them back outside and be around the campfire where, you know, it's like the great equalizer, right? You're out in the woods around the campfire. It's none of that other stuff matters. Your job, your income, your address, none of that matters when you're around the fire. And now you're roasting the coffee in a way that is also connected to nature and connected to the land. It's not about the science. It's not about the nameplate on the roaster. It's just about like, I got to work with the wood. I got to work with this bean. I got to work with the earth and the temperatures around me and the wind. And I got to be in tune with it. The approach has always been different for me in that, you know, where traditional roasters have all the control, I have to have more harmony. I got to just play my role in there. I can't be the conductor. I'm just part of the symphony. I'm part of it. And I have to respect that. It's almost automatic now, but especially very early on when I was trying to get this thing down. I haven't perfected it yet, but I'm trying to get it down. In the early days, it's really humbling because all it takes is a split second and you can burn a batch up. Because coffee's very delicate. You got this very delicate thing, and you have to be mindful. I'm trying to also manipulate the wood and making sure that the heat is even and get it down to just cold so I can get a little bit closer, a little more radiant heat. And so I'm learning how the different types of heat work at that point in time. But then I'm also thinking to bring it back, like how this relates to how we present this entire brand to the world. It really is that when I tell people, I try to lean more into this being an outdoor brand than a coffee brand, because I'm trying to tell the story of how we connect to the land, we connect to nature, and it's all the way down to how we roast the coffee. It's like the coffee is just a conduit to humanity kind of thing. This is how they were doing it for thousands of years. It's only in like the last 100, 150 years that we've had traditional roasters. And even those were still wood fire. And it's even newer that we have these gas powered machines. You know what I mean? Like,
The paradigm too has been so shaped. I feel like in the public psyche, coffee is, it started in 90s with Starbucks. People, you know, this is like millennia old.
this is as old as Adam and Eve in the garden. It might as well have been the fruit. It's been around that long, man. I mean, how the narratives can be changed with the power of marketing, the power of storytelling. You get a lot of people think coffee started with Starbucks in the 90s, and they had no idea that Starbucks as a brand was around long before Howard Schultz came along. That part blows me away. Oh, so you don't realize that he was just an employee that they hired and then he bought the company? Like, they were doing some whole other stuff. Whole beans and spices and teas. It's the power of storytelling. For us, it's always been more about how can we utilize this thing that we all love that has such power, not just economically, but holds power in terms of its space in human history. There's so much more potential within this thing that we've now commoditized. I would sit around the fire in the backyard in the early days and I would think about, like, dang, there was a brother in the jungle somewhere sharing this as they were telling stories around the fire and doing dances and rituals. They were passing around this brown water or juice that, allowed them to stay up late. And, back then, like, everything had a very spiritual meaning behind it. So you drink this special concoction and you'll be up, you'll dance and you'll have ideas. And so it becomes a thing that the poets, the playwrights want to have, and the dancers and the storytellers, the griots. And you see how far coffee spread. This is something that blew me away. I'm getting into coffee, right? Speaking of Coffee Fest, I don't know if it had to have been the following Coffee Fest. I would have been Coffee Fest of like 19.
Yeah, that
was in Tacoma, right? So Coffee Fest of 20, I'm on a panel with Phyllis Johnson. That's the queen. That's Aretha. That's Beyonce of coffee. And I have no business being on the panel with Phyllis Johnson, right? But afterwards, after that panel talk, I remember getting an email. And I don't remember if it was from her or someone else on the call. They sent me a passage from a book. It dawned on me. In the book, and it wasn't about coffee, it was about the slave trade, but it talks about how it is estimated that up to a third of Africans that were brought to the New World in the transatlantic slave trade were bought to cultivate coffee. And we never hear that.
Whoa.
But peep the evidence. How do you think we got coffee in Brazil? Which is the number one producer in the world? How do we get Colombian coffee, which is another world topper? Around the time of the slave trade, Haiti was the biggest producer, exporter of coffee in the world. The Dutch were buying it by the boatloads. All of them were brought to Haiti not to cultivate cotton. They weren't in the field picking cotton or growing tobacco or rice. It was coffee.
Wow.
And it blew my mind because I said, you goddamn right. Yeah. But that part of the history gets left out. Wow. But that's the power of storytelling, right? If you see it, like, oh yeah, that does make sense, because coffee doesn't just grow in these places. It grew in Africa and it made its way west. This whole narrative could change again. Have a whole new chapter that finally ties back that missing link of the stories of these cats somewhere in a rainforest, roasting coffee over the fire. That was the thing that gave me confidence, because I worked in barbecue years ago. It clicked. I kind of knew how to make a campfire. But I remember going to YouTube, trying to find how do you roast coffee over a fire, and nothing came up. And I'm scrolling, I'm hitting page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I get to like page 23. And it's an old VHS that had to have been from the 70s, no sound video, of this brother in, I'm going to assume it was Africa, shirt off. He's got this massive drum of coffee, and he's just spinning it over this big bonfire. There's no sound on the video, but he's just like, and he's putting his whole body in, and it cuts, and all this coffee's laid out on top of a blanket.
Wow.
You can tell this cat learned that skill from somebody that learned that skill from somebody that learned that skill from somebody that learned. Like, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. But the story needs to be told.
It is an opportunity to rewrite these stories. It feels like collectively people are kind of waking up to this idea of, we don't need to just keep going along with the status quo and following the institutional narratives and infrastructure. Like, come on, we have all the abilities for us to start doing this and creating new stories, especially if we can find common ground and build this step together. Let's figure out how we rewrite these systems and bring the community together to say, what can this look like moving forward? It feels like collectively too, beyond coffee even, people are kind of waking up to this idea of, oh, we don't need to just keep going along with the status quo and following the institutional narratives and infrastructure. Like,
Come on.
we have all the abilities for us to start doing this and creating the news stories, especially if we can find common ground and build this step together. This little corner of the world that we can control together, or that we can like collaborate on. Coffee has this outsized, like, talk about punch above your weight, right?
Massive.
When we look at the stats, it's like, okay, more people pay using the Starbucks app than use Apple Pay right now.
What?
Yeah. It's the 10th largest bank. Starbucks is the 10th largest bank in the world based on what they have on balance remaining on cash cards. That's the utilization. That's like, so talk about a point of leverage. Average American does it 3 times a day. You do it in the, we see bumps in our data. It's breakfast, it's right before lunch, it's right after lunch. So we're like, so from a consumer standpoint, if we're thinking about reimagining systems, let's come together on this. So with that in mind, is folks like yourself that are thinking about, hey, how do we change paradigms? How are we thinking about the roots of how things have been done? How do we bring that to now? How do we write the story, a new story going forward? Mm-hmm. Let's figure out how we rewrite these systems and bring the community together to say, what can this look like moving forward?
It's about coffee's highest and best function, in my opinion, is as life's accessory. Mm-hmm. My research was how arts entrepreneurs create and exchange value in a digital economy. When you go through all of this schooling, you learn how messages and environments influence groups. So then when we think about like, how do you change a paradigm from my academic experience? What does the research show around that? Groups tend to think and act differently than individuals, even though individuals make up the group. As individuals, our reptilian brain is prone to pick up cues from the people we're closest to in our tribe, in our group. And that's how hierarchies in groups that we got is somebody would be the one to lead the pack on the hunt. And how they moved is how the rest of the pack would move. And I think it just takes repetition of showing the group through social proof, right? Somebody in the group has to put it in front of them, but it has to be repetitive. I was just talking with a friend this morning about ads that she sees on TikTok. That was funny. Because she was like, you worked in marketing. Like, what was this like for you? And I was like, well, we would always sit and say, like, you, talking about my neighbor, I was like, you are definitely like the person that most brand managers want to hit. You're a 30-something mom of 2, you live in a higher income zip code. Like, everybody wants to market to you. How often do you see an ad and what does it take to make you buy? Once you see the ad, she's like, it's crazy because I see an ad about 7 to 10 times and I'll eventually buy it. But it takes the 7th time. Now, what happens in between those 7 to 10 times?
You see that in the data too.
Right?
Crazy.
You see it too.
100%.
But now let's think about what happens in between that time. They saw it first. And that's like inception. And how the brain works, right? The brain is a pattern-seeking tool. Eventually, there starts to be things that get downloaded that help reaffirm the messaging around that particular ad. Oh yeah, Mom, you are busy. You do deserve something uncomfortable. After seeing it 7 times and having a hard week of getting the kids to soccer and basketball and so-and-so got hurt on the playground, you do need a break because nobody is there to think about Mom.
Yeah.
But this friend is, and look at this real comfortable Snuggie. So when you get that 5 minutes, you get the Snuggie, and then finally payday hits, and you're like, I'm buying the Snuggie. Because that's all the stuff that has had to happen in that time to change the individual paradigm. It's the same process. It just happens in group settings. And the more people that start to get nudged in that direction. And so paradigm shift is the exact same principle, but it happens in these groups, right? And you just have to see it enough. And you just have to get enough social proof from people that you depend on or look up to make you say, oh, you know what? I'm going to switch. And then suddenly it becomes normalized. But through this whole time, you're going through the inception, or when tragedy strikes. So how does a fundraiser that's only supposed to raise $3,500 raise $20,000? It's not about the convenience at that point. It's about how somebody felt and the impression that you left on them, possibly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months ago. Go through the comments on that and you'll see on posts that I've made, haven't been to Tacoma in months, but love your shop. That's awesome. I'm donating. And I'm going to go on and buy a bag of beans.
So this conversation around fear versus trust-based decision-making.
It's heavy.
And man, I feel like what's in coffee specifically, Brendan and I were talking about this. I think more than pretty much any type of business, it is an expression of themselves. So it's like you put your ego out on the table for everybody to like come in and take a sip and be like, I don't like this. And then it's like compounded because it's like, no, that's your livelihood.
Absolutely.
It's like your food, shelter, safety, base hierarchy. That fear will strike deep. And then you got the personal, emotional stuff. So what is your advice to other owners that are maybe grappling with that?
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to speak on that because I came to the coffee business with an advantage of having played almost 500 live shows.
You steeled up a long time ago.
A long time ago. So the skin has been thick. Like I know what it's like to go and play in front of 1,500 people one night and 5 the next. Just 40 minutes down the road.
Wild.
And then go back out the next night and play for another 500. And then the next 5 shows has a combined 25 people, right? Like I know those ups and downs, right? And early on in that career, man, it does do something to you because that is right. Like these are my words. This is my music. This is this is all of me out on the table. And damn, nobody's like. But what would happen there? What I kind of figured out pretty quick through the data, right? I needed to get to the 3rd show in the city. I needed to be able to get to play a 3rd show. So that 1,500 to 5, right? Like this is a real example. Denver, I always had this thing with Denver, and I don't know why, but I always was drawn to the state of Colorado and Denver. That's a whole other combo. But I played a show in Denver. My first show in Denver, I was opening up. I was the support act. It was me and Duro, ice cream paint job, right? 1,500 people. The next night, I played in Boulder to 5 people. I went back to Denver a year later. This time I was headlining. Me as a headliner, 300, 400 people. Pretty damn good. Played Boulder again. This time there was 25 people, 30 people. Went back to Denver like maybe 9 months later. Same outcome, few hundred kids. I'm the headliner. Great. Went back to Boulder again. This time it was like 100 kids.
Wow.
I needed to be able to convince the buyers at venues that I'll take your Thursday night. I needed to start with like a third. Don't give me a Tuesday because I know it's a failure. But give me a Thursday or a Friday night, and then watch me work up to be able to get at least 100 kids in here. But it took me a while to understand that it was like getting to the 3rd show. I think business owners need to be able to realize that you have to just stay on track. Not that you have to be like overly persistent and really just keep trying and keep going. Like you just need to keep moving in that direction. You don't have to exert any like extra force and just keep going. You're already doing, the work is happening. It's like that 7 to 8, right? Like, it's already happening. The wheels are moving and you don't even know they are. You just got to keep going. You need to go and play Boulder and keep doing it. I needed to go play, right? It was the same thing in Philly. Boom, got to Philly, blew up, had a great show, played Lehigh Valley. It was a dud. Kept going back to Lehigh Valley. All of a sudden, Philly, Lehigh Valley. I played more shows in Pennsylvania than any other state, which is random.
Yeah.
But it was like Pennsylvania became like my spot.
Wow.
Pittsburgh, Central PA, and then the Philly, Bucks County, all of that. And then I'd go into New York. But it was just, that's when it kind of became like a bit of a science for me, where like, even if the show was a dud, there was enough energy put into that first show that it's going to linger a while. I just got to keep coming back. And I might have to go back to another venue, right?
Well, and here's the challenge too, because how do you summon the same kind of emotional energy when there's 500 people there and when there's 5 people there?
That's the truth.
Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get.
And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to tell my baristas on slow day, right? Because we've talked about this. Market Street is such a bonkers store. It's weird. There's no real flow there. I think it has a lot to do with the population that's around it. It's a commuter campus. It's, you know, transient people coming there for the convention center. The convention center opened up their own coffee shop inside of there, right? So there's all these things that kind of, because convenience, to your point about Starbucks users, right? Like, if it's convenient, like, the consumer is always going to pray at the altar of convenience.
People won't cross the street in a downtown thing like this. We see the data. It's like, it doesn't matter if the shop is across the street. It's like, I don't want to walk across the street.
No, walk across the street.
I'm going to settle for whatever's right here.
It's right here. They will pray at the altar of convenience over all things. And so what tends to happen at Market Street is we have a new wave of people that come in almost constantly. They have to kind of like be searching for us in a way. Right? And so what we end up having to try to tell the staff there is the slow day, let that be the day that you really lay it on thick. You may not make a lot in tips, but I guarantee you, if you give great service, because now you have the platform to do it. You don't have a line of people that you're trying to get through the door. Make that connection, be genuine, right? I'm not asking you to be going through the whole, and I never ask my staff, you don't have to, hey, I know. Like, you don't have to do that. Be you, be genuine, but connect with the person across the counter from you and make sure. I never use speed as a metric, ever. Especially when it's slow, like, take all the time you need to connect with that person and make sure that your presence was felt in a positive way, because it's going to pay dividends 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months down the line, or when tragedy strikes. Right? So how does, a fundraiser, right, that we put up, that's only supposed to raise $3,500, raise $20,000? It's not about the convenience at that point. It's about how somebody felt and the impression that you left on them, possibly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months ago. Go through the comments on that and you'll see on posts that I've made, haven't been to Tacoma in months, but love your shop. Awesome. I'm donating. And I'm going to go on and buy a bag of beans. So it's all in, like, again, it's just back to humanity. We can talk about the quality of the coffee and all of this bullshit that we try to use as a differentiator, when really all it comes down to is social proof and how you make people feel on that one-to-one, right? And then they bring that back to the group. They bring that back to the collective. So now in the comments, people are seeing in the oh, damn, I remember visiting their shop. It was great. And now we just understand that that's the role that the Market Street store plays for us. It's never going to be a world beater. It can't. It can be a great spot and a great experience for those that do choose to come there.
And a good vehicle to get people to buy those subscriptions.
Bingo. And it can be an experience, and we can do things with the space to make people say, ooh, and ah, and wow, and gotta take a picture and share with my friends. But we may not ever get to the point on Market Street where there's like 150 customers a day. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the function that it plays in our overall portfolio.
Yeah.
Right? Like the TPU store is different. We got a flow, we got a morning flow, we got an afternoon flow. There's 2,000 employees above us. You kind of just get in the flow. You know you're going to get, especially Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when they're all on campus.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, well, that's more of your traditional how coffee shops run, restaurants run. You have waves. You can bank on that.
Yeah. There's a rhythm.
There's a rhythm to it. You can get used to the rhythm. Market doesn't have that kind of rhythm, but it has a strong potential in being this experience center. If you ain't gonna be a world beater, that's okay.
Yeah.
But you gotta be strong on the other things. So when things like bad things happen, people will rally around you.
Thank you all so much for taking a listen to this week's episode of Building in Public. It was a ton of fun talking to Quincy. We're having a lot of fun having these conversations and pulling back the curtain a little bit. We have more content actually that we have captured than what I can personally edit and put together, but we're trying to keep this authentic and raw and scrappy. And so we hope you're enjoying it. We're having a fun time making it. Let us know what you're interested in understanding better so we can put that story out. So thanks so much for taking a listen. Until next time.